Hello and welcome. UVA Speaks is a podcast of Lifetime Learning, a division of the Office of Engagement at the University of Virginia. Lifetime Learning brings the knowledge and expertise of UVA's faculty to the university's alumni, friends, and families. My name is Susan Lynch, and I am the Associate Director of Lifetime Learning at the University of Virginia's Office of Engagement. This podcast features Bonnie Hagerman, an Associate Professor in the Department of Women, Gender, and Sexuality, and Director of Undergraduate Programs at the College and Graduate School of Arts and Sciences at the University of Virginia. Her research focuses on women, gender, and sport and 20th century American social history. She's the author of the book Skimpy Coverage, Sports Illustrated and the Shaping of the Female Athlete. This spring, Professor Hagerman is teaching a course entitled Gender and the Olympics in the Olympic Games. In this podcast, Professor Hagerman will talk with us about some of the topics she's covering in her course this semester, and specifically about the history and participation of Black women in the Olympics and beyond. So thank you, Professor Hagerman, for speaking with me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Great. So first, can you provide sort of a history of the participation of Black women in the Olympic Games?
Yeah, sure. And let me just kind of provide a little bit of context for the revival of the modern games, which were introduced in 1896 through the efforts of a number of people, but are predominantly associated with Pierre de Coubertin. And the first iteration of the modern games was held in 1896 in Athens. And at those games, no women participated. And Pierre de Coubertin thought he was doing women actually a great favor by allowing them to attend, which was more than what the ancient Greeks allowed at Olympia. So American women actually didn't compete until the Olympic Games until about 1900. And that had a lot to do with the fact that the IOC was not a really strong entity, and individual host cities really made their choices about what kinds of events to include and who participated in them. So at the 1900 Games in Paris, women were able to participate in 5 different events, including croquet, golf, sailing, tennis, and then there were some equestrian events that were open to women as well. Margaret Abbott was the first American woman to actually win a gold medal, or at least the equivalent of a gold medal, but she had no idea she was actually participating in the Olympic Games. The Olympics were tied very closely to the World's Fair, both in 1900 and then again in 1904 in St. Louis. And so a lot of people in 1900 came to find out that they had participated in an athletic event that was actually an Olympic event. So while American women, have their first shot at participating here kind of in 1900, Black women won't be participating in the Olympics until 1932 for the first time. Tidie Pickett and Louise Stokes will both qualify for the 1932 Games in Los Angeles, but will not be allowed to actually participate. Though they qualified and won their spots, a racist coach would not allow them to participate. Both of them would qualify for the Games again in 1936 in Berlin. And of course, these were the Games where Jesse Owens secured 4 gold medals. Tidie Pickett would actually be able to compete. And fortunately, she injured her leg in the hurdle event and was kind of out of the Olympics after about 30 seconds. But once again, Louise Stokes actually was taken to the track to compete in the relay event for which she'd qualified for. And once again, a racist coach pulled her off the track and she was unable to compete. So 1932, 1936, we'll see Black women qualified to compete in track and field. That'll be true in 1948, where Audrey Patterson will be the first Black American woman to win a medal. She'll win bronze in the 200 meters. And then Alice Coachman, again in 1948, will win a gold in the high jump, becoming the first Black American female to do so. I think that what's interesting here is that for all of these women who are entering the Olympics, are participating in the Olympics and meeting some kind of success, we see them participating in track and field. That's not a surprise. It was one of the few sports that was open to Black women for competition. Other sports like figure skating, for example, Mabel Fairbanks, who became a really well-known coach, coaching the likes of Scott Hamilton, for example, and Ty Babylonia and Rudy Gardner. She was not allowed to actually compete for the U.S. national title because of segregation. So when we talk about Black women in the Olympics, for a long time, we're talking about them in one sport, in track and field predominantly. And certainly Wilma Rudolph, 1956 in Melbourne, when she's 16, gets a bronze medal, and then comes back in 1960 in Rome and wins 3 gold medals. And this is celebrated by a number of many people, numerous media outlets, including Sports Illustrated. But nobody's really questioning why Black women's Olympic success is crucial to the American medal count against the Soviets, but only really happening in track and field.
Interesting. So thank you for that context. And so can we go a little bit beyond the Olympics for a moment, and can we talk about with us about Black women in sports more broadly? So I'm thinking about, for example, Serena and Venus Williams, and what are some of the issues that Black women face in other sports that are similar to those faced by women in the Olympics?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think certainly there's been a history of issues with equity and inclusion, some of the same kinds of challenges that we are facing and working to address on our grounds. And so we're talking about issues of opportunity and also acceptability, I think, as well. Certainly, Althea Gibson broke the color barrier in tennis, and you can certainly draw a direct line between Althea Gibson doing so in 1950 and then Venus and Serena coming along in the 90s, and then certainly dominating into the 2000s. But while Althea Gibson's breaking a color barrier, there are not a ton of Black females following her. Certainly Zena Garrison, Chanda Rubin, but they're not. It's not the color line is broken. It's not like the gates are thrown open. And tennis is an expensive sport in terms of rackets, in terms of stringing, court time. It's a country club sport, what the great Billie Jean King calls kind of good clothes sports. And we see that being a very limiting situation for a lot of Black athletes. Certainly, we saw that with golf as well. And what's interesting is that Althea Gibson will break the color barrier, not just for women and for Black players in general in tennis, but she'll do the same thing for the LPGA. She'll be the first Black woman to earn her golf card. I forget what that is, licensing, whatever. So I think this idea of femininity too, in terms of the acceptability of women playing sports has been a challenge. Some scholars really feel that Black women have actually less of an issue in terms of acceptability because sports tends to prize power and speed and strength, which are all kind of, you can qualify as some kinds of, prized masculine traits. And there's this feeling that Black women didn't have as much to lose because they were already associated with those kinds of qualities, holdovers from stereotypes associated with Black women and slavery.
Interesting. Thank you for that. I also think about Venus Williams, really the pay equity that she really brought to bear on the, following up from Billie Jean King and the work that she did within tennis. Yes,
and she doesn't get enough credit for that. There's a fabulous documentary that Anna DuVernay actually directed for ESPN called Venus Versus. And while we often think about Serena being very vocal, being very public, and we don't necessarily think about that in terms of Venus Williams. And she absolutely was critical in continuing the fight for equal pay. And Wimbledon's going to be the last of the 4 Grand Slam championships to give equal pay. There was a moment in that documentary where the organizers were like, yeah, how could we give equal pay to women and afford all of the flowers at Wimbledon? At any rate, it's really worth a look for those of us who really respect Venus Williams for her contributions to the game and to sport overall, but for equal pay as well.
Yeah, her advocacy work. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. In the 2020 Olympics, gymnast Simone Biles withdrew from the competition and brought about, I think, a broad conversation about athletes and their mental health. So can you tell us a bit more about her and that topic?
Yes, there's just no question that Simone Biles has elevated this topic. And it's a huge one. I mean, we've seen other athletes wrestle with this very publicly. Michael Phelps certainly did so and talked about this, this idea of sport very much being tied up with his identity and the expectation that he was going to win, or the burden of those expectations. And I think that Simone Biles really came at a time, talking COVID, of course, where mental health was on everybody's, it was on their lips. They were talking about it. It was on people's agendas. And she was really the right person at the right time. And I think in sports, you can really talk about athletes who come along to a time and really are able to elevate a particular issue. I think about Billie Jean King and pay equity back in the 1970s and the Battle of the Sexes, for example. I think you can certainly make the same argument with Simone Biles really coming at a time and embracing this role and being open to talking about it, and open to talking about the fact that she's introduced this issue, and she's proud to have done so, even as she continues to struggle with her decision not to compete. She knows that it was absolutely the right one, but there was, again, this burden of expectations, this feeling like she was letting people down, herself down, the nation down. And when you're talking about the Olympics, it's more than just an individual performance. And she was really kind of one of those athletes that everybody was expecting. I mean, it wasn't just whether she would win, it was how many gold medals would she win? And she's the greatest of all time. What I think is really awesome that's come out of that conversation is that there were so many people who were supportive of that decision, defended that decision, not just media people, media personnel, but other athletes at the Olympic Games, really praising her for that decision. I think that is huge to see that kind of understanding, acceptance, and her interest in returning or trying to return for 2024. It should be very, very interesting to see.
Yeah, I think like you were saying, it was the right time. I think she also had a tremendous amount of grace, and in that time, she really showed a grace for everybody around that topic.
And I think the other thing that's really important is that she does show the importance of mental health and physical performance, that you can't, that these two are very tied together, and you can't just think about a physical performance without thinking about having a good mental health and feeling like you're in a position to talk about your mental health or get treatment for it and so on.
Yeah, I mean, it was potentially very dangerous for her to continue. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, she had what they called the twisties, which is, you kind of lose yourself and not know where you are in terms of landing. And that's super dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Certainly at her level. Absolutely. So, Over the years, there have been some scandals around the Olympics. Can you tell us about some examples around that?
Sure. Well, so one of the scandals that we're going to be talking about in my class is going to be the Tonya Harding, Nancy Kerrigan situation, which is now, the 30th anniversary of that scandal, which, of course, was, the concern or the that U.S. figure skating had, the Olympics had, about Tonya Harding's involvement in Nancy Kerrigan being injured. Certainly, it seems at the very least that Tonya Harding knew about it afterwards. There's less agreement about what she knew beforehand. So there's another great documentary, which is The Price of Gold. That's another ESPN documentary, which talks about that. And of course, I, Tonya has come out more recently with Margot Robbie in the role of Tonya Harding. What I think is really interesting, and what Tonya Harding brings up in the documentary, is that people watched the figure skating long program at the Olympic Games in 1994. It was came in with higher rankings and higher ratings than some of the NFL Super Bowls. And so it was really a scandal that put figure skating on the map and really elevated it. More people than ever were watching figure skating. More people than ever were watching these same athletes compete or in ice-capades or in some of these follow-up shows. More figure skaters were getting endorsements than ever before, except for Tonya Harding, who ended up being banned from the sport for her involvement, at least in the obstruction and kind of cover up of the crime. So we are going to be talking about that, and this need for some of the media to make it into a catfight, this need for some of the media to really portray women and female competitors in very stark terms. Nancy Kerrigan as this good girl and Vera Wang designer outfits, and Tonya Harding as this kind of trailer park trash. And these and what does that do when you're playing with stereotypes instead of real people? And what does it mean? What are the larger connotations of this particular scandal, I think, for women in sport more broadly? So that's certainly an important one. Another big scandal was the Ben Johnson testing positive for steroids in 1988. And this is followed up with Marion Jones testing, she never actually did test positive for steroids. The raid on Balco, which was the Bay Area Laboratory Cooperative, yielded information. There was a file on her that yielded information about the kinds of performance-enhancing drugs that she took. So it's interesting. Again, Ben Johnson will fail a drug test in 1988. Marion Jones never will. And so there's an interesting piece here about the millions and billions of dollars that's been spent on trying to test for performance-enhancing drugs at the elite level, and very few athletes actually testing positive for those. Now, another more recent scandal is going to be Kamila Valieva, who did test positive for performance-enhancing drug abuse at the most recent Winter Games. So, performance-enhancing drug abuse continues to really dominate the Olympics, and the Olympics are having to contest with that. Certainly, the state-sponsored doping by the East Germans in the 1970s. Again, there are some great documentaries on that. The Last Gold is a great documentary about the ways in which East Germany systematically doped its female athletes, many of its female athletes, in fact, almost all of them in terms of the swimming team, And they won gold after gold after gold medal, except for one that the Americans were able to snatch in the relay team. And the last gold kind of talks about that. But performance-enhancing drug abuse continues, whether it's by someone's own desire or initiative, or whether it's state-sponsored. And we saw the Russians be banned from the Olympic Games for their sponsoring of statewide system of doping.
Right. Thank you. And finally, for many women, the Olympics provide an opportunity to participate in their sport, because so for many, without the opportunity to compete in a professional league of some sort. So the Olympics provide them with a platform for commercial success. Can you talk about the importance of the Olympics for women athletes in that regard?
Yes, it's huge. Lolo Jones, certainly, who's a summer athlete, hurdler, talked about the importance of commandeering endorsements and during an Olympic cycle, because it would help her pay her bills for all of the other non-2 weeks of an Olympic cycle. So the next 3.5, almost 4 years. Excuse me. So the endorsements are huge. I think what becomes really important here is to consider who's getting those endorsements. Are those endorsements being given out because these athletes are thought to be winning gold medals? Is there a sense that, their athletic aptitude is going to secure gold medals and they will be successful because of that? Or are these Olympians who are really great looking and in a traditionally kind of classic sense, and thus are going to garner more attention and thus more clicks or what have you for the companies that are choosing to hire them? So I think, again, this idea of who has Olympic sponsorships and who has access to those, and who has the privilege of securing those, which means, securing a measure of financial security for another round of training for many of them, because the goal is, for some of them, is not just kind of one Olympics and done, but trying to come back and do better than they did before.
Yeah, especially because they're, track and field. There isn't anything else beyond the Olympics, right?
Exactly right.
They don't have a professional way of making money around that. So it's so important for them to be able to secure those types of things.
I think there actually, I think, is a professional track and field. I'm not sure if it's a league there, but again, it's certainly not on the order of the NBA, the WNBA, and the like. So we're talking, and you think about other sports like rowing, for example. There's nothing past the Olympics is kind of the penultimate moment. And what does it mean in terms of how athletes are able to pursue Olympic careers, and what are they giving up as a result?
Great. Well, thank you so much, Professor Hagerman, for sharing this information about your research and teaching. This summer we have the 2024 Olympics, so I will certainly be keeping this history in mind as I am watching. So thank you again for sharing your knowledge and expertise with UVA's alumni, friends, and families.
It was such a pleasure, and I'm sure I'll be joining you and watching the Olympics for many hours this summer.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks to everyone for listening. For upcoming podcasts and other lifetime learning programming, recordings, and blogs, please visit our website at engagement.virginia.edu/learn. You can also find our podcasts on the Virginia Audio Collective, which is a network of UVA podcasts hosted by WTJU Radio, and can be found at virginiaaudio.org. So thanks again, and we look forward to you taking part in future lifetime learning programs.